Hi everyone, my name's Yvonne Villarreal and this is the LA Times Emmy Chat. Thanks so much for joining our conversation, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to start with, how did these roles for you challenge your comfort zone?
Anybody? Don't make me start.
I nominate you. You're already
Go
talking.
for it.
Well, for me, I think, all of us are happy to get a job that we like with people that we like, hopefully. And that certainly happened for me. So I think the only challenge was, I think unlike many of the stars before me, this was kind of the first, quarterback position as far as having.
It's not unlike the stars before you.
Yeah, that's unlike. I think so, maybe. I mean, it's. All you big movie stars and TV stars and theater stars would know this, but it was the first time I had like a real leading position, I guess, at least in a film situation. So it was the first time that I guess challenge-wise is less about the content of the role and more about the workload itself, and that is exciting because it's fun to be in a position to sort of, I guess, set a tone in a crew and on a set. So that was a challenge, I guess, having to work more hours, but. I think it's not really a challenge so much as a really encouraging obstacle, because depending on how you look at it, anytime people say, this is going to be hard, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I don't think of it as a challenge. I just look at it like a jetpack to let's get there. I don't know. So it's more of the workload than the actual content. For me, at least.
And Versace went on for a long time, for a while, didn't it?
Yeah, it was like a movie for a whole year. Yeah.
For a year?
Every time.
Yeah, well, roughly. I mean, it seems like that. Most of 2018, so maybe not a full year, but it's it's a 9-hour movie, and every episode is we shot more than that. So, yeah, it's nice, but like I said, nice.
Did you shoot in reverse too, or did you do it chronological? I mean, the storytelling takes place in reverse.
Well, the way that that it ended up is in reverse order, but just like anything we're shooting, nothing is unless you have the luxury of having a line producer that shoots it in actual chronological order. Yeah, that didn't really happen. So I mean, it's told out of order, but we shot as much all over the place as any production would.
But you would shoot episode 1, 2, 3, 4, or would you shoot
kind
all
of?
9?
They were all kind of whenever you could get across everything.
All 9 episodes?
Not all 9, but if they were next to each other, 2 or 3 would all be kind of all over the place. Yeah, which is pretty crazy. Although I will say, we had a director. I wish this upon all my colleagues. There were 2 episodes that were meant to be in succession, 4 and 5, and we had this wonderful director, Dan Minahan, who. If the theater folks will appreciate this, we did a table read of both, and that is something that you just don't have the luxury for in television. Maybe you do, but I've never had that experience, at least in Ryan Murphy land. We don't have that kind of time. So we had a table read, and he shot it as much in sequence as possible because it was like a 3-hander play in an apartment, and he was really respectful and sensitive to us wanting to kind of play that out in a very sort of hoity-toity actor mind frame way, which I thought was extremely luxurious, and yeah, that was a first for me, so that was amazing. So on the opposite end of a challenge, that was one of the more wonderfully considerate parts of the creative process. But I've talked enough. I have enough speaking.
Maggie, comfort zone?
Well, I guess I think you sort of said this. I feel like I want it to be difficult, especially if it's a long thing. This is many hours. I don't want to take on something that feels like territory I've already been in. And I think also for me, like the roles that interest me are the ones where it feels like they're kind of on the edge of what I know about myself. Like there's something like that I will have to learn about myself in order to play the role well. And I think I was interested at the time. It was a long time ago that we shot the pilot for this and that I decided to do it. And we're shooting the 2nd season now, so it's over a long span. But I was interested in like sexuality, femininity, power, commerce, and I think it seems to me like everyone else was interested in that a few years ago too, because now it's like all over the place. Like now it's on the table. And
you shot during the election, right? Or
we shot season 1 during the lead up to the election. And I mean, obviously none of us knew that Trump would be elected, but all of the same issues that are like really overt now were just bubbling under the surface then. So misogyny and, like I said, power, sex, it was on everybody's minds. I think it's why they wrote the show to begin with.
Yes, I know you probably can't sum it up, but what did you learn about yourself?
You know, I always say, like, I want to learn something about myself, and everybody always asks me that, but I...
So original.
There you go. Thanks, David, for chiming in.
I'm sure that you can relate to this, that, like, what I learned about myself isn't, like, and I learned that, you know, such and such a sentence, you know, whatever, but I kind of, like...
There's got to be something, though. I actually think you're deflecting the question.
Okay.
Because you don't want to get personal. You go, hold on.
Missing it.
Okay.
Oh, no,
I learned about myself that I am, like, way more hungry for, like, all sorts of things. I'm not satisfied.
I love that.
I'm like, it's the same as candy.
Answer.
I'm like, I'm hungry. I want more. I like artistically, in terms of, like, what you feel entitled to, what I feel entitled to as a woman, as an artist, as a, like, that's all over what happened for her. And I mean, it's definitely true for me too. Okay, there you go.
That was a great answer.
Yeah. Nice for probing.
Yeah, no, very personal.
You're right. I did deflect it. You're right.
No, I think it's very hard. I mean, I think that I'll in the spirit of camaraderie, in fairness, I will reveal that I learned a lot about myself as well, in terms of, like, things that were not very pleasant. Like, I learned about my own arrogance. I learned about my own way that I use charm to deflect things and how thin that can be sometimes. I learned about all these qualities of myself that are sort of weak covers that were necessary for the character and were kind of great to play, but I learned that they were not so difficult for me to play. And so it was, like, very interesting. It's very interesting to discover stuff about yourself that isn't always romantic and good. Like, there's lots of inner strength that I uncovered as well, but there's also these qualities where you're like, oh yeah, I'm not what I see myself as.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because, like, now I'm going into doing the second season, and I have never done that before, played the same character over a period of time, and I feel like my character learned the same things I learned. Like, did your character learn the same things that you learned?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. It was the first time I'd ever done a second season of a show as well. So going into the second season, I was really nervous because the arc of him in the first season is so complete and perfect. Yeah. Like, he starts off such a jerk, and then he learns to live, and he saves the child that he could have saved. You know, he couldn't have saved with his own child, and he breathes again, and, like, he's alive, right? So it's like,
and then you're like, go again.
Well, no, so yeah. So you're like, what do you do, right? Yeah. Because the construct of TV is like Gilligan's Island. Like, you always show up on the island in the red shirt. Like, so you're always the same guy. Like, or like Friends. Like, you're always like Friends, right? Like, so the idea that a character, you're gonna have to take a different journey. Like, the impulse is, like, let's just do the same thing. Like, have him say Coffee and Contemplation, like, bring out all the hits, and, like, have him be adorable, and then grow to, but you can't do that. So I was very conscious starting the second season that this has to be a totally different journey and arc. And he's a totally different guy. And so in the year before season 2 starts, I had to think very specifically about what transpired in that year, and then what I wanted to play going into season 2. And I actually talked to the writers about this as well, that would be totally different, but would expand upon what we did before. And also, like, I think that what's so interesting about characters, like him particularly, is, like, you know, in terms of his tragedy or what he deals with, he starts the first season 5 years out from the death of his daughter. So what interested me was less the death of his daughter and more the 5 years. Like, how does that person go to the supermarket? Like, how does that person just walk around town? They're not sad anymore. I mean, of course they're destroyed, but they have charm and wit and things like that. So in terms of saving Will and what that savior complex does to you in a year, and then how you can start season 2 in terms of that savior complex, was very interesting, and see the arc of that. But it's the same guy, but I had to make him very different. The work I had to do was very different going into season 2. I don't know if personally I sort of like my work more in season 1, but I do know that I was proud of myself for at least trying to do something very, very different in season 2 and not sticking to what I knew from season 1.
Do you think you guys as writers, this is for everybody, I guess, writers are cognizant of that? Obviously, as an actor, if this is the first time you're going to a second season for something, are you in season 2? What season?
We're about to start season 3.
Started being 3, and then, you know, for all of us that have done multiple seasons of stuff, I mean, that as an actor, we're all like, man, I really hope we're not pulling out the same hits, or maybe enough of the hits, but, you know, in New York, do you find that those, I mean, are the brothers or any of the writers like very, like, okay, cool, you know, we're gonna do this, or do you find yourself in the driver's seat being like, look, like, we really would like it if we can do X, Y, and Z as opposed to 1, 2, and 3. Do you feel
I'd be
in
curious
control
from
of that?
you,
Yeah,
you're
from all
going
of you
to
guys, because
season
you're
3.
going on season 3.
Well, the trick of our show too is it's not linear. Like, I play a character from 22 to 67. So I play all of these different, 4 hours of
great.
prosthetics is intense. It's so, because I'm really the only actor on the show that does that, it's interesting. I mean, I would be curious. I know that, like, before we start each season, we sort of sit down and have, like, before we started actually the whole show, we sort of got a general, like, macro idea of the life of this family and what sort of happens, because the actors present day who play our children have to know, obviously, what happened in their lives as, like, kids and teenagers, because it fundamentally affects who they are and the choices that they make as they get older. So it's different. It's tricky.
Do you guys like knowing where your character's going, or do you like to be surprised just as they would be surprised by whatever life events happen?
I guess I like being surprised. Well, I have been, you know. We're going into season 2, but having worked with, you know, Ryan Murphy Camp and doing the, you know, year to year, you're just doing different characters year to year and different storylines. So I'm always, and sometimes you would get the script maybe 2 weeks before you start shooting, you know, so it really is a faith walk, you know, and you just read and you're like, and throw down, walk around, okay, I gotta do it, process it and come back. So I mean, I don't mind that spontaneity and finding out. They're great writers, you know, they're very creative, and they're always, you know, giving you something really, you know, dynamic and fun to play with and interesting.
Jonathan, I imagine
captures the audiences. So
you knew ahead of time, like, where the trajectory was going for the first season?
Yeah, we did. We had all the scripts right at the beginning. Yeah, and we read through all of them. But I feel like I as well, I like to know the general arc of where you're heading, and it was great to have those read-throughs. But I like the spontaneity of being on set, and, like, for example, David Fincher, our director, when he was directing, because he was sort of the mastermind behind the whole thing. And it was this way with Ryan too, actually, on Glee. When the mastermind is on set and you're in the moment doing what you're doing, and it starts to change and evolve as it's happening, and, like, David would think of lines to write in the moment, and things would happen in scenes in the moment. So the arc was always the same, but I love the spontaneity in the moment.
So talk a little bit about where you were at in your career when these roles came up for you. You know, Mandy, you have a story.
Not really. I just couldn't find anything to do. I had done like 3 failed pilots, and I was like, well, maybe this acting thing is not for me anymore. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this since I was 15. I'm 33 now, so I was like, it's been a good run. You know, maybe I go back to Florida where I grew up and go back to school or do music again or something. But it was like I just couldn't. I mean, you guys know as actors, it's like I couldn't find traction, and I was just anxiously waiting for someone to give me the opportunity to be an adult, to be a woman and not be a little kid anymore. And thank goodness for Dan Fogelman and for this opportunity. It's like I read the script and I was like, I am Rebecca. And I had no idea it was just a pilot, and it was like in the middle of like a weird time. It wasn't even pilot season, and you know, you only read the first episode. So I had no idea that this was like the matriarch of the family, and just like how big and momentous her story would sort of be.
Did they offer it to you? Did he also see you as this part?
I auditioned and I waited for like 6 weeks. I had known Dan Fogelman from this Disney movie Tangled that we had done together. He wrote it.
So good. I was hoping you'd mention it. You're like, I wasn't working. I was like, well, I saw Tangled. It's excellent.
Doing animated film
That's
is
true. Exactly.
it's very, very different work. But so we had known each other, but that was like, there was like a, 6 years in between then. But yeah, I auditioned and just waited with my fingers crossed, and it all ended up coming to fruition. But yeah.
I think it's really interesting what comes to you when.
Yeah.
You know, like it's sort of trippy. I think it's a little trippy. I think like sometimes you're like, why am I calling to me all of these like divorced cops or something? And I'm like, I'm not into that. I don't want to play that, you know? And then then like out of that comes like someone who sees you, someone who's like, I actually think you should play a street hooker, you know, or whatever. And you're like, yes, I see, you see me. But really, I think it is interesting what comes to you at what moment, and
life,
also like whether you're able to go, okay, inside that is something where I can express something about the way I see the world.
Yeah, that I haven't been given the opportunity before, or I've been like waiting for.
Right.
Absolutely.
And being bold enough to be like, no to the other things, even if there isn't a lot of other work, you know?
You're right.
The thing that I keep saying about, I mean, being in company with all of you, we've all been very blessed to be part of really cool, you know, projects, and we've also been very lucky to work on a lot of cool things before, but for whatever reason, the alchemy of the moment and the people in your life kind of bring you to these particular peaks and valleys. And I keep, you're saying the opportunity thing, you know, I keep telling folks that I've known forever, like, actors are only as good as the moments we're given. I mean, we've been the same tools in the same toolbox for years, and you're like, use me, like, I'm here. And like, all these characters that we've played, you know, have been within us like our entire lives, and it's just a matter of somebody seeing you, and these kind of gatekeepers seeing past what's right in front of them, or what you had just done, or whatever superficial, you know, barriers you had in front. That, you know, it takes a certain kind of visionary to see past those things and give you these opportunities and pick you up at a toolbox and be like, how hard can we use this? And yeah, until somebody sees that, unless you're writing your own thing and auteuring your character and the piece as a whole, it's like you really do kind of have to wait and just pray that these things come, the Dan Fogelmans and the Ryan Murphys and the David Finchers and the Duffer Brothers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's an amazing thing where you really feel like what am I going to do next? Like, who's going to see me or see the next thing that I don't see? And I'm constantly just so overwhelmed with the, like, how little control I have over those kind of zeitgeist moments. And so I guess I don't know what I'm saying other than it's nice to be picked out of
I don't know
the
that I
list.
agree with the idea that the characters are always within me or something, or that I'm just waiting to sort of, like, I don't think I could have played this guy before 4 years ago. Like, I don't think I was ready. I don't think I was, like, you know, the guy at all. Like, I think it sort of came at a point in my life when, you know, I was sort of ready to go to work in a different way. Like, I mean, I'm a lot older than you, so, like, I've been in lots of different phases of, in this business, I guess, like, if you call it a business or whatever, right? So it's like I've had periods of, like, where I felt pretty inspired and good about what I did, and then I've had periods of, like, true cynicism and just showing up and being like, whatever, just, like, saying lines and being awful in things. Like, I have work out there that's just awful. And so I think that in a certain, what?
As long as you know it. I'm kidding.
Everyone knows it. No, that's the fun of it. So I think that, like, that's sort of the alchemy or the kismet of it, is like, it sort of came to me in a place where I was so tired of being cynical. I was so tired of showing up to work in a crappy fashion that this thing sort of, it all sort of came together where it came to me, but also I was like, I'm going to go to work in a different way. Like, I'm going to actually invest in this in a way that I haven't in a long time with my kind of Hollywood supporting guy with a gun career. And so in that way, like, it couldn't have come for me. Had it come for me when I was 30 or something, I would have messed it up. I would have been.
How?
Huh?
How? How would you have messed it up?
I wouldn't have used the arrogance. I would have been arrogant about it. I think that there's something about me in my 40s that's great, whereas me in my 30s was, like, a bit more of a difficult time. I think I had a lot more ambition with a lot less to kind of show for it. Like, a lot less work behind what and sort of investment in what I wanted to do. I had a lot more feeling that, like, I deserved these sort of things. And I think as I've gotten older, it's like when they threw me this, I was like, oh, I'm going to actually work on this now.
I was thinking about that recently because I've been working and thinking about, like, what it means to have a point of view.
Yeah.
Because, like, I also have, like, learned how to work as I've gotten older. how to prepare.
Yeah,
you
you've
know?
developed your point of view too.
Yes, and also that
And your technique.
I know I have to have a point of view, and I was watching a young actress who's totally will become very, very good and not have a point of view.
Yeah.
And you can't really do anything. Well, you know, it's not true. There is this kind of acting, and it especially happens with young women, I think, where you can just be emotional, respond to something else you're given.
It's honest.
It's honest. There's a beauty in it. But I'm much less interested in that. I'm much less interested in watching that, and I'm much less interested in doing that.
Me too, but that's age sort of.
Yeah,
right?
that's
I mean,
right,
that's
yeah.
like, it didn't come to me. I didn't figure that out until I was like, I really didn't figure that I even wanted to see that until I was like 35.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was about 35 too. Well, yes, I think that's true. I was maybe like, 34, 35. I was making The Honorable Woman, and I was like, I have a point of view, and I don't want to fight anybody about it. This is my work, you know? And like, something really changed for me about that time.
Do you mean like your take on the character? Like the choices you were making about, like, in the development process or in the moment?
Yeah, like, what is the scene about for me? Like, how do you work? How do you sit by yourself and work? You have to learn your lines. I mean, I just don't understand when people come to work without their lines learned. I really don't. I just
Yeah, I know, it's all right.
I mean, I understand that sometimes you're like really struggling and you got to just learn it as quick as you can, like the makeup trailer sometimes, but mostly you've got to do
had that experience?
Yeah, I've had that. Well, I've had the experience also of like.
Angela would not have that.
No, everyone seems to. Yeah, but it's
But I mean, like, you, how do you work? You learn your lines, and then what do you do? And I've recently figured out what you do is you go, what is this scene about? What is this scene about? Because I don't have to wait for
maybe
someone
that's
else.
from more in television and film. Like, as you say, you work alone. You know, you're doing a lot of your work yourself, as opposed to if you're in the theater, where you come every day and working with others, and you're really working it out and discovering and changing, and trying something different the next day and the next week, and and it's maturing.
Yeah.
The world and the characters and the relationships. So
Yeah.
it is, I think, that's the difference. Like
Yeah.
you said, what a lot you have to do, in television film, do a lot of your work on your, unfortunately, at home yourself, and then bring it and shoot it that day, and and hope that that's the best you had today to offer.
Yeah.
And tomorrow, when I know more, I could have gave more, but we've shot it already, so.
I mean, I think what you're talking about a little bit, though, too, is like Lee Strasberg did say there was a difference between a creative artist and an interpretive artist, right? So the creative artist is someone who brings their own, in a sense, brings their own story to the story, right?
Right.
Whereas the interpretive artist, like, interprets. And they're good. I mean, it's not that it's bad, but the idea that you can bring an arc to something that already has an arc in it, but you yourself can bring and see that, like, this scene functions better if I don't cry, or this scene functions. Do you know what I mean? And like to be conscious of that process, and then to create things that enliven your subconscious so that it's spontaneous and real and interesting and crazy and weird, but to have a conscious process in front of it is something that I hadn't realized till I was 35.
Me too.
Yeah.
I would say it's the same with me.
Yeah.
So let me ask you then, do you think that because I feel like it's so different depending on the director. Yeah. Like sometimes they allow space for that, and sometimes they don't allow space for that. And sometimes I feel like my point of view, I discover what my point of view is when I watch it, where I thought I did these things, and then I look back and I'm like, oh, it was that, and I had no idea this. We're different in the theater where you're, you're telling the story every night, but it's so hard for me to quantify point of view as a specific thing because it feels so amorphous and different with every director, even every day, where sometimes I feel like I can communicate point of view, and then sometimes I feel like, what are we doing? I have no idea.
I don't think it's a good idea to tell anybody about what your point of view is.
Yeah, I agree.
I think
It's just for you to know,
You have
and
to
to
be-
carry,
know.
and to bring to
you tell
to the-
them, and then all of a sudden there's the opportunity for them to go no.
Yeah.
I don't think you
test it.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
But being an artist is a bit of being like a bad student, like being kind of a punk, I think, or being like a thief or something. Like there's a bit of a secrecy about it. I agree that it can be enlivening and super fun when you're playing it, but then once you sort of let the magician tell people the tricks, then they
I do it sometimes, I think like
And you
that's
get
a
in fights
weakness
about
of my. Not anymore. When I was younger, I did. But
Right.
sometimes I'll be so thrilled with this idea that I say it, and then I'm like, stop, don't talk. You know, that's a problem still for me sometimes. Although it's getting better, because I see how powerful it is to just keep your cards close to your vest, and then there's no opportunity for anyone else to, you know, you're not asking permission. You know, and I think, and I think also like you just have to gently create enough space for you to do what you need to do. Just take a little, don't take more than you need, so you have the space to like do it.
And I think even like with a director, like let's say I have the impulse to, you know, or we rehearse a scene and I have the impulse to grab Maggie by the shoulder or something, right? In rehearsal we can try that, and then the director can say, and it's part of my process or whatever, the director can say like, don't do that. And then you're like, oh, I don't have any space. But you can still want to. And you can still feel it in your eyes that like there is this impulse. So the space that you have, they'll never be able to take away your brain or whatever. Like they'll never quite get the thought police. So like they can, you know, so in that way it's a bit of a negotiation in terms of how much space you have. Some directors, there's tons of space. Like I find with the Duffer Brothers, and it's the reason why I love them and adore them, is there's just tons of space. Like I can do whatever I want in a scene, and they will support it.
How much of when you're deciding to take on a role, is it about the role? How much is it about who you'll be working with?
I think that's a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
It sort of depends.
How was it for This Is Us?
I mean, again, I was so desperate for anything. I was like, I'll take it.
Jackpot. I mean, what a great cast.
It's an incredible cast, and we all had no idea. I didn't know anybody until like we showed up for that first table read for the pilot, but I knew that John and Glenn, our directors and executive producers, and Dan Fogelman, like the script was so well written, and he had sort of given us an indication of like where the show was going to go, and that was really interesting. So yeah, I mean, it was like equal parts excited about the character and the people that I was going to be working with, especially after that table read. I was like, these guys, this is another level.
Well, for me, it was just, you know, it was staying home, you know, because I have young kids, you know.
How old are your kids?
They're 12 now, you know, so I didn't want to, you know, I could have gone to Canada to shoot something else, so I had this other opportunity that was a to-go series, but then the opportunity to come home with a known entity, work with Ryan and Tim Minear and Brad Falchuk, and having the history, because as I said, there was no script, there was just this idea of what it might be, you know? And
So
there was
signed
another
up.
idea, and then that one changed, and it became this 911 idea.
You signed up with just the group of people and the
Yes,
idea.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and that's because there's history. I don't know if I would have. I've been, you know, more attentive about doing that if I had not worked with them before for 4 years, you know, and seeing how they write for you and you know, so it was a lot of things that time. But sometimes it's the director, a lot of times it's the cast, or something I feel in the story that I want to say, you know, in the world that I, you know, somewhere like you say, back there, believe in and want to put that out there.
So what was the thing for you that you believed in and wanted to say in the world?
Well, this one is dealing with
And we're all being like, we're all going in. Like that,
just I like the idea of this strength juxtaposed against vulnerability, how we fall apart and how, you know, and how we pull ourselves back together or not, but usually, you know, strength of character, how we do that. And in this, it's a familiar, this family relationship, and it's, you know, it mirrors society, and it's how we're going to deal with it and raise these children, you know.
What is it like being in the Ryan Murphy orbit?
I feel like I fell ass backwards in like the most majestical wonderland ever. I mean, I guess my entire life I've always idolized these partnerships between certain creatives and their actors. You know, like if I could just be Sofia Coppola's Kirsten Dunst, if I could just be, you know, Tim Burton's Johnny Depp, et cetera, you go, that would be cool. And make a couple films and just be friends and make stuff. That's where it's all about. And life's what happens when you're busy doing other things. And I didn't realize that I had this Ryan Murphy thing. By the time I joined Glee, I mean, in my mind, this was the Nip Tuck guy. Oh, this is the guy that did Popular. This guy's like a big deal. I didn't know he had a whole like nexus of stuff to come. Yeah, it's an extraordinary camp. I mean, you have credibility walking into work. We're very fortunate because we're coming off the heels of an amazing first season of an incredible show from the OJ series. So yeah, you trust everything. Even when I'm, you know, going against my own impulse, I go, well, you know, I think these guys know what they're doing a little bit. I can fall into their safety net, hopefully, ideally. Yeah, I find myself becoming inarticulate with the amount of gratitude that I have for having the luxury of somebody like the Ryan Murphy camp. But I do want to parlay this into a question for David, because on the flip side of that, when you have people like the Duffer Brothers, who are now every fanboy and every fangirl not only knows their name, Netflix as an entity is now sort of, I mean, you know, your show is like a flagship of this now monstrous, you know, media, you know, source. So for you, you know, doing a lot of, you know, you've done a lot of TV, you've done a lot of theater, you've done a lot of stuff that, you know, didn't necessarily have a second season. When you said that was your first, second season, I was shocked. I was like, no way. That's crazy. So what I guess I want to ask is...
Yeah, my career's been strewn with failure.
Well, I mean, to be a part of, you know, you see, okay, it's Netflix, is that the streaming, okay, Duffer Brothers, would they do like a short film, a horror short film? You know, is there any part of you that's like, I don't know, man, like, or were you like, hell yeah? I have no idea.
You think I have all these options.
I don't know.
I love that you have that image of me.
I do.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Well, don't dismantle it.
No, sir. No, sir. I was like, I read the script. The script is amazing. Well, the pilot script was amazing. It was different than the one you saw, but it was an amazing script. And also, it was like a lead part in a Netflix show. Like I had just, I think, you know, been. I mean, I really hadn't worked in like 5 months. I think I'd been auditioning for a bunch of stuff and kind of that whole getting close phase or something, and then it would go to the other guy sort of thing. But I was, I was miserable. And so, I mean, this came along and I auditioned for it. They had known me from some other stuff I'd done, but I auditioned for it, and yeah, it, you know, it worked out. But I was thrilled, beyond thrilled, to like be a part of this thing. They had something called a lookbook, you know, along with the thing, and they had a fake trailer that they put together, which had like scenes from like Jaws and like E.T. and all these things. And there's something about that world that's just so fun, right? Yeah. And so like looking at all these old photos, and also something about me growing up, like, you know, I was born in '75, right? So in '83, I was 8 years old, and I remember going to see Raiders of the Lost Ark when I was with my grandma, who liked air conditioning in the theater. Just took me every week, and we saw it like 8 times together or something. Oh, so those guys too, like those leading men who I grew up with, which a little further back, '70s guys, more like Gene Hackman and Nick Nolte, but like Harrison Ford and like these guys who are like that trope of like scoundrels. The messed up scoundrelly dude who like with the heart of gold. Like I didn't want to play it that on the nose. I was very careful of that trope. Yeah, you're perfect. All right, but I've been in love with that trope for a long time, and I really wanted to invest and go a little more messed up with it. But yeah, I was thrilled when I read the thing. I was like, I didn't think I'd get it. I never thought I'd get it.
And how did you find out? Like, how did it go?
I waited, I auditioned for it, and I remember Carmen Cuba. You know Carmen Cuba? Oh, you should know Carmen Cuba. She's like the best casting director in the world. I turned to the camera. But no, she really is an amazing casting director. She had been interested in me to do this, but it's one of those things where you hear those things all the time. You're like, oh, they really want you for this. And then like nothing ever comes of it, right? So I went and I made a tape, and then I think they said that, I think they called me and they were like, they really like you, but they need to kind of convince Netflix because you're not a star, you know? And so I think there was like a week where I was like, you know, panicked. on and calling my agent every day, saying like, "Call them. Can you just call them and just tell them that like I can do this?" And they were like, "Just leave it alone. They're gonna. I think it's gonna work out." And then I got a call like late at night, saying like, "You got it." And I was walking down the street. I picked up the phone. I was just like, you know, just that quiet. Like,
Yeah.
I was like,
Oh, the sound went out of you.
there's no like screaming. It was just like,
it's inverse
it
imploding.
just felt so good.
Yes.
But then, of course,
your
the like
breath away.
fear starts, and that generates into an entire different thing.
whole other
But I
chapter.
remember, it was a very difficult process. I wasn't working at all, and then like I got this, and I was like, oh God.
I mean, but you wanted to, like, you read things and in your mind you go, yeah, this could totally be a hit. Like, we all hope for the best and
We didn't think
want it
this
to be a
was
hit.
gonna
But
be a hit.
did you? I was going to say
no.
the cliche question is, did you know?
No. We really didn't know this was going to be a hit. I didn't think it would get, because when we were shooting it too, like, there were so many days where you're down in Atlanta and you're all just hunkered down doing this thing, and everybody's just like tired, and everybody's like, it's not really working, like, you know. And I actually even like after right before it came out, I was doing a play in the park, and I shaved my head into a mohawk because I didn't think we were going to get a second season. Like, because Netflix wasn't advertising it. I was like, I think they're burying it. Like, it's whatever. It's been the story of my career. It's those moments when people tap you on the back and they go like, your life's going to change. And then you're like, and it never does.
Nothing happened.
You're like, nothing ever comes of it. And it's been that way for like 15 years. So I was like, that's fine. Like, that's fine. I liked my career that I have. I can work plays. I can make a little bit of money in supporting roles. But then, so when it came out, we didn't think anyone was going to watch it. And then, yeah, it exploded. But it was different.
What has fascinated, Jonathan, this should go to you first. What has fascinated you about the world you were inhabiting with this character?
Oh, God, okay. Serial killers are pretty fascinating. And what's weird, though, is that what fascinated me even more than the real life stories of the serial killers was the psychology of how to talk to people and how to get them to open up. And the whole show is basically, it is about serial killers and the FBI in the late 70s, but there's no action. And it's all just people in rooms talking. And one of the things that drew me to it initially was the scenes felt like scenes from a play because they were 10 pages long and incredibly psychological. And so learning how to mirror people, learning how to ask the right questions, and just the psychology of getting people to open up was really interesting to me. And then how that kind of affects the characters in their real lives. Like the character that I play sort of starts as a Mormon and then ends up like becoming like quite intense and good at speaking to degenerates. And then what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. How about working with Fincher? Please share what that was like.
God, I'm like obsessed with him. It was amazing. To me, he's always the smartest person in any room, in my opinion. I'm sure in a lot of people's opinions. And so to have someone to go on a 10-episode journey with someone who is so specific about what they're doing and so smart made me feel so relaxed because I could just be like, I wasn't holding on to any secrets, you guys. Point of view. I was just kind of like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Tell me how to
direct all of them?
He directed the first two and the last two,
right.
But he lived with us in Pittsburgh for the whole time that we were there. And he's incredibly specific and...
Did he find your tics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I guess, to answer the first question, the first thing that came to my mind when you asked that, is that when we were sitting in the room doing rehearsals, he said, this character is not charming, this character, in the beginning, doesn't know how to relate to people, doesn't know how to be charming, and all you ever do is smile. I'm going to smile right now as I'm saying it. And I'm not going to let you, Jonathan, smile as this character for the entire season. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, really? Yeah. And I thought it sort of seemed like kind of funny joke thing that he was saying in the beginning, and then as we got to working on the thing, it would be like, okay, and we're rolling, and Jonathan stopped smiling, and you're still smiling, you're still smiling, okay, and action. And he picked this thing that sort of what you were saying about Candy, about learning about yourself. And he does it with crew members and writers and the other directors on our show and all the actors on our show. He's just so smart. He's able to like zero in on the thing. And that was the thing with me. And for my driver's license picture, I did not smile. I told him yesterday. I was like, hey man, I didn't smile for my driver's license. So it's a, but learning how like, you're
saying
what you were saying, David, about
charming. Use to
yeah,
navigate in the world.
To sort of like take off the edges. What you were saying about being charming, like using charm to diffuse situations and not being necessarily real or honest in things. That sort of starts to change a little bit in my real life because of the work that we were doing on the show, and just even like playing like the girl that plays my girlfriend Hannah, having to play a romantic scene without smiling was a whole like, oh, how do I? He just sort of sent me on this like puzzle that I had to solve of like, how do I do all of these things and hold on to this thing at the same time, which is such a small technical thing. But
I have a question related to that. I mean, and especially for you, because you have a family, right?
Yes.
So when you work very intensely on something, does it? How do you keep that out of your family life, and how does that affect your family life if it does? Or, I mean, are there boundaries that you set that are very clear? Or?
Well, none of the roles have been like so intense, you know, to that degree. But a lot of times, I mean, the hours are long. I mean, you know, you're in the house, you're breathing the same air, and you don't get to see them. But I do get a little. I just do what I have to do and need to do, and it might be pulling away a little bit selfish, but I talk to them, you know, when I'm free, and I talk to them. I take them, we go, we do, or I explain that I'm passionate about this, and that's what I want for them in their lives, to find something that they're passionate about as well, and to be fulfilled. So I stress that. So if it's Courtney and you got to go away and do, you know, or kids, or whatever it is they want to do, and don't stop me from doing what I need to do. So
yeah, I'm so curious because I'm like a crazy person when I work, and so I'm curious, like if family is in the cards for me or whatever, like how.
No, it's helpful. I think it's helpful. In some ways it's harder, obviously. Sometimes you'll come into work and be like, I'm so tired, and I'll be like, oh, really? Did you go home and take a bath and order room service? You're so tired. But at the same time, what you do get is you come home and there's like these kids who are like, I do not care what you are doing today at work. I do not care if you were 70% there or you were so there and you learned something about yourself. I care that you read me a book and that you like give me a bath. And it is nice. It is helpful.
How much do you think about the message your show has in whatever time it's airing? I mean, you talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but like how much do you consider that? Like people watching This Is Us because they crave connection, or, you know, whatever, like the power dynamics, or, you know, gay culture and homophobia. How much do you think about that?
I mean, I am just, we're all people in the world who are aware of what's happening in the world, consciously or unconsciously, whether you're a political person or not. It's in the air we're all breathing. And so I am compelled by things that feel current and and I want to be on like the edge of it. I want to be like having the conversation that's hard to have. I want to like make people feel like, ooh, are you on the wrong side of this, or what's the right side of it? And then, you know, I'm naturally compelled by that. It's less for me that I think like I'd like to do a show that talks politically about this or this or this. It's more like an emotional kind of politics.
Mm-hmm. Darren, you want to answer that?
Well, I mean, drama is conflict, right? So like, you know, struggle is always in vogue. So people who watch anything, regardless if it's a certain time period about a specific thing or something that exists in a fantastical world or something that's very real or something that's very intense, I think when you boil everything down to their common denominators of people struggling or people trying to overcome something, I mean, it doesn't matter where you're at in your own life, whether it be politically, personally, theologically, people find ways of inserting their own narratives into that of fictional or non-fictional characters in storytelling in the media. And so I guess regardless of what frame is around it, be it this particular story from our show or any of the other stories that we're telling, I think it always is going to strike a chord. It's like the same way when you hear, you know, that love song from that when you were a teenager, and you're always going to contextualize your own story to that song, even though the song might not necessarily hit exactly what you were going through. You find a way to connect your narrative to it in the same way that I feel, and I hope, maybe this is delusions of grandeur, maybe being overly romantic about it, but I feel like no matter what place and time people are experiencing things, there's enough common denominators about all the struggle that exists in all the stories that we're telling that you know will hopefully speak to people. I mean, unfortunately, you know, conflict is always gonna be fashionable. Unfortunately, but also fortunately, because it means we're getting through stuff.
Well, final question to end things. Are there roles that haven't come your way that you hope to, or have you found that since doing this role, you're getting the types of roles that you've been wanting to see land on your plate?
Mandy.
What?
This is
Andy, we're all looking at you.
look into the camera and tell
What are
the
you
world.
doing next?
Yeah.
No, I'm very fulfilled right now. I would be happy to have this job for the next like 5 years. I feel like, because again, the sort of way that the storytelling goes, the fact that I'm able to jump around from decade to decade, and I get to sing on the show, like there's so many parts of me and my professional life that I'm able to sort of infuse in it, and it's the best job I've ever had. So I'm happy.
Do you guys find that when you get known in certain circles for doing something, then you just get offered that thing all the time?
All the time.
All the time. So if like doing musicals, then you get offered musicals, or if you're playing gay, then you get offered gay stuff, or if you're an FBI agent. That's been my experience, where it's not been like, well, you can do everything. Yeah.
People like Fincher.
Boss lady, FBI
You
agent.
say he's like the smartest man in the room, but I wonder if it's, I mean, I believe he probably isn't the smartest man in the room, but also it's this other quality that I think really excellent directors have. It's not intelligence exactly, it's like an interest in, like, who are you actually? Like, okay, Jonathan thinks this is who he is. I know that I'm seeing some other thing in there that I would like to see him do. So then there's those people like that come and get you, and they don't ask you to do the King and Hamilton over and over and over and over again. They ask you to do something totally right for you, but that you never would have expected.
Totally.
That's what I was saying earlier about those people that can see you, that sees the tools in the box and go, okay, you know, we've been maneuvering you this way, and
well, I would like someone to see me sick and demented.
yeah. Well, because on
the sick and demented role.
well, on the one hand, you know,
I saw you play. Well, I don't know if I would describe her as sick and demented, but I saw you play Lady M.
Lady M,
When I first got to New York.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. That was fun.
Yeah, she's a little.
Look into the camera, we'll show it to Ryan. Well, thanks so much for taking part in this conversation. It was really fun. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.